No, it's 29. Okay, so just real briefly on chapter 26 quiz. So we're looking at the chapter 26 quiz. Although everybody's here, I think I forgot to take. I'll do that. Thank you. I take attendance, and you're supposed to take our attendance right away. I'll do that in just a second. Okay, so I explained this to you before. I'm just going to explain it to you again, and then we're going to spend a little time on the essay. So number 3 says, unbelievers can have no assurance that God's Spirit will continue His convicting work in their hearts. And that's not something I talked about, but what it's saying basically is if you refuse to follow Christ, or if you don't want to yield to God, He has no liability in that. Like you can have no assurance that He's going to convict you. Convict just means, in this sense, to feel your guilt, right? So you may or may not. I mean, feel guilty for your sin, but that's not on God. That's on you and me. Does that make sense? So that's all that's saying. It's just saying it in kind of a convoluted way. And I don't think that's on a test or anything, so I'm not sure you have to worry about that. So I don't think, I didn't take any points off for the essay. I actually even didn't read them, although some of them I was like, really, what is that for an essay? But because I don't think I did a good job of preparing you to answer that question. So we're going to walk through this, and now I want you to write down anything that is not included in your answer. The question says this: in this lesson, Christ described His death as by using the illustration of planting a kernel of wheat, or a seed of wheat. Explain what He meant by that illustration. So here's what I wrote down. If I were you, I would write down something similar to this. When a seed falls or is planted into the ground, when a seed falls or is planted into the ground, it, in a sense, dies. Meaning that it ceases to become what it once was. If you put that kernel of corn in the ground that we talked about last week, and when the stalk grows, right? If you pulled that stalk out by the root, would you find that seed anywhere? No, it no longer exists in that form, right? So in that sense, it dies. However, it grows, it germinates and grows to produce a plant with far more seeds on it. So it grows or it germinates to produce a plant with far more seeds on it. Similarly, when Christ died and rose, it produced a harvest of human souls. When Christ died, it produced a harvest of human souls. Who become followers of Christ. It produced a harvest of human souls who become followers of Christ. And then, in turn, 2 words, in turn, lead others to believe. So it produced a harvest of human souls who become followers of Christ and then in turn lead others. Now, I gave you all this for two reasons. The first one is so that you would have the correct answer to the question. Secondly, so you'd have an understanding of what I expect when I give you one of these essays. That's not even an essay. What I've just written for you is a paragraph. That's all it is. So I would call that actually a short answer, not an essay. Everybody got that? Excellent. Everybody has the chapter 27 quiz? Excellent. So now, please, we're going to go through this together. I'm not going to collect this. I'm not going to grade it, but you need to make sure you have the right answer. When you have your Unit 6 test, and when you have your final exam, the vast majority of those questions are taken from the quizzes and tests. So you want to hang on to your quizzes and tests because those are free answers to your final test and your Unit 6 exam as well. I can't remember now if there's 6 or 7 units, but you'll have at least one more unit test. Okay, what were the 4 questions the Pharisees and Sadducees presented to Jesus in an attempt to trip him up and therefore allow them to accuse him of error? And then how did Jesus respond? So what was question 1? Yes?
What authority do you have?
Right, so by what authority do you teach these things? It's a question of authority. So by what authority do you teach these things? Now, Jesus doesn't exactly answer that question, does he? What does he say in response? You've written them in your book, so it should just be a matter of if you took notes. Lecture. Now, yeah, Caleb. Yeah, so was John's baptism from men or from God? If it was from men, it was invalid. If it was from God, it should have been followed, right? So Jesus doesn't answer the question per se. He says, was John's baptism from men or from God? And then he says, answer this, and I will answer you. Answer this, and I will answer you. What was the second question? Mary?
Is it lawful for us to give to
Right. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? Lawful meaning not in the Roman law, obviously it was. Under Jewish law, was it lawful to pay taxes to a foreign conquering government? So is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar? What was Jesus' answer, Cheyenne? Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's. What belongs to Caesar. That's another way of putting it. And to God, what is God's? Or what belongs to God. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. What was the third question? Mary?
which commandment is the most important?
Nope, that's the fourth one. What's the third question? Thank you,
About the brothers.
right.
So,
Yeah, so it's this long build up, right, to the question. But the question is, in the resurrection, whose wife will the woman be? Okay, in the resurrection, the woman who married this fictitious woman that married 7 brothers, right? So in the resurrection, whose wife will she be? Which of the 7 will be her husband? In heaven, please. What's the answer? What answer did he give? I may fall off my chair and snore. I'm here, okay? What was the answer? Yes.
What but those who are considered worthy to attain that age and to the resurrection of the dead, either married or being
Right. So it basically it's there is no marriage in heaven. His answer is there is no marriage. And Mary, now, what was the 4th question?
which commandment is the most important?
Right. So which is the first and most important commandment? Like what's the most important thing we have to do? What was the answer, Trinity?
Love God.
Love God, right, with all your heart, mind, soul, strength, and then love others. Love your neighbor as yourself. So love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, let's move on to the matching. Jesus dined at his house in Bethany. Who was that? Simon the leper. Yep. That's G. Who anointed Christ's feet with costly perfume? Mary. That's D. Who was a pretender, actually loved money more than the Lord? Judas. C. Who asked to see a coin? Jesus did. Bring me a denarius. So that's A, Christ. Who did not believe in the resurrection? Sadducees. F. Who was the object of Christ's most fierce denunciation, his harshest words for these people? The Pharisees. The Pharisees. And then who asked Christ about rebuilding the temple? The disciples. B. Yep. Okay, any questions on any of that? Good. Excellent. You're doing great. Turn in your book, please, to chapter 28. We are on page 205. I'll read the introduction to you, and then I'll I'll let you answer some questions. The little boy sat mesmerized as he watched the strange things that were happening around him. The members of the small church to which his parents belonged were celebrating the Lord's Supper, or communion, as some people call it. The men and boys of the church sat at a long table on one side of the small church's basement. The women and girls of the church sat at a similar table on the opposite side of the basement. I have no idea why. In front of each adult at both tables was a plate. Serving plates held stacks of light bread. Serving bowls contained a gravy-like liquid that they called the sop. After a prayer of thanksgiving, the adults dipped the slices of bread into the sop, placed them on their plates, and ate them. The little boy recalled thinking how gross the gravy must have tasted. After everyone had eaten their sop-soaked bread, the preacher directed them to the next part of the service. Every other adult bent down and began to wash the feet of the person sitting next to him. Oh, that's why. And her, and then dried them with a towel. This ceremony continued until every church member's feet had been washed by someone. Next, the preacher distributed portions of long strips of unleavened bread to the adults and older children. The little boy recognized these bread strips because he had seen his mother baking them earlier that day. Then the preacher spoke for a few moments and read some verses of scripture. Then everyone ate the strips of bread. Finally, each drank some grape juice from some little tiny glasses. The little boy didn't understand much of what was going on, but he knew that it was this was a time during which the adults were very serious and thoughtful. It was definitely not a time for a little boy to misbehave in church. As tedious as the ceremony was for him, he enjoyed eating the leftover bread strips after the service. They didn't have much taste, but it was the only part of the ceremony that he really understood. He finally got to eat. Not all churches practice the ceremony that little boy witnessed, but they generally practice some aspects of celebrating communion or the Lord's Supper. As even the little boy knew, it was a solemn and serious commemoration of the death of Jesus Christ for us. How serious was the subject of some of Paul's writings in 1 Corinthians 11. Paul warned in that passage, whoever shall eat of this bread and drink of this cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner shall be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. But let each man examine himself, and so let him eat that bread and drink that cup. For he that eats and drinks unworthily eats and drinks death to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. Communion is an important part of the life of a Christian. It is a corporate reminder to the church that it is to be done in remembrance of me, in other words, in remembrance of Christ. When you participate in the Lord's Supper, do you do so seriously and introspectively? You come to the Lord's table only after first seeking forgiveness from both the Lord and other believers whom you have offended in some way or who have offended you. That's taught in Scripture. Are you taking full advantage to recenter your life and heart on Christ and the incomparable work he has accomplished? Before you partake of communion the next time, think seriously of what you're doing. Examine yourself carefully, confess any sin that might cause you to eat and drink unworthily, and then remember what the ceremony symbolizes, which is Jesus' last night with his disciples and his institution of this whole thing that we do at our churches with communion. So you're going to read John 13, 1 through 38. You can do that together in your groups. You're going to answer those questions. Let me know when you are done, because we're going to at least try to begin going over these if there's time before the end of the hour. So I'll get started on that, please. There we go. Okay. Oh, but I need my other glasses. I'm also going to give myself more light because then someday you'll be like, oh, that's what Mrs. Stevens was talking about. She couldn't see. Okay, first question. Why do you think Peter resisted Jesus washing his feet? Yeah.
Because he didn't feel worthy.
This is, and I'll probably mention this in the lecture, but this story is the only instance of a superior, someone who's, like your boss or superior, washing the feet of someone under that person in all of ancient history. In all of ancient history. I mean, this would have been shocking to them. And so I think he didn't think that was appropriate in any sense of the word. We'll talk more about why that is when we get to the lecture, which we'll start doing tomorrow. What attitude did he show in his resistance?
Stubbornness.
Maybe stubbornness, yeah. Any other ideas? I'll tell you what the book says, and then I'm going to tell you what I think, okay? It could have been pride disguised as humility. Here's what I think. I think it was utter shock at what Jesus was doing. I'm not going to be too hard on Peter here. Because it would be like if someone came to you and said, look, I just bought you a brand new Ferrari. Here are the keys.
Thanks. Thank you.
No, I mean, think about how shocked you would be, right? And maybe your first thought would be, okay, what does this person want from me? But you're not just going to say, cool, thanks, and get in the car, are you? No, I don't think so. I don't think so. So he's shocked. He's shocked at what is happening. So I'm going to give him a pass on his attitude, whatever that is. What attitude did it take for Peter to yield and allow his teacher and master to continue? Yes. Humility. Probably humility. He realizes that this is Jesus and he needs to do what Jesus is asking. Why do you think Jesus would have permitted an unbeliever to infiltrate his inner circle of disciples? Okay, that might have something to do with it, to prove his deity and to show the truth. Did Jesus know who was going to betray him from the beginning? Yes. And it was going to take someone in his inner circle to betray him. It had to be someone who knew him well enough and knew his schedule well enough to betray him. And he knew it was all part of the plan that he signed up for willingly. So I think that was Judas's purpose in that. At the same time, Judas made the choice of his own free will. Nobody forced him to do that. God just knew that he would. Through Jesus. The events seem to show plainly that Judas was the betrayer. If you were one of the disciples, what might have made you think that he was leaving to take care of the group's business? Do you remember what we learned about Judas? Yeah.
He was like the treasurer.
Exactly. He was the money keeper. And so they probably thought, okay, well, Jesus told him to go buy something. Because all Jesus said is what you're going to do quickly. And so they might have thought, okay, he wants Judas to come right back. He's going to go get something for us and come right back. Again, misunderstanding in John. If you were Peter, how would you have felt when you heard Jesus predict that you would deny him? Yeah. Distraught. There's no right or wrong answer here, but I think distraught is a good answer, yes. Panicked. Yeah. Hurt. Yeah. Anna.
Rejected.
Rejected? Yeah. Yeah. Shocked. No, I won't. No, I won't. And yet he did. After cutting off a dude's ear, right? Trying to defend Jesus, he denies it. But you know what? We are all dirty, rotten sinners deserving hell. We are all weak. We are all prone to sin, including the disciples. Okay, that's it for today. You've got maybe a minute to talk. Good job. Good work today.